Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the Deep Dive Pop Culture Podcast from Nerdist. My name is Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. I'm very excited this week to be joined by a guest I like, which never happens. Just kidding. It's off. It's quite often. You probably know her from her excellent, for my money, honestly, one of the best film and media analyzing YouTube channels out there, as well as her brand new podcast, Lynch Pins, all about the work of David Lynch. Please welcome to the show, Maggie Mae Fish. Hello, Maggie.
Hello. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
For those of you who don't know, I can't imagine too many people listening to this won't. But before we get into movies and David Lynch specifically, I wanted to ask, what, other than just you had worked in YouTube before, what was sort of your impetus for starting your own thing and going your own way?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. It was truly a mix of having a terrible day job and Cracked. I mean, Cracked was fantastic experience. I was a very new baby hire, basically right before they went under. But it was great. I loved everyone that I worked with. And yeah, so in lieu of that, I was babysitting. And as much as I love children, and even other people's children, it was a terrible job, and it was not fun. Yeah, so desperation, basically. I had a script that I had already written for Cracked that was ready to go when they went under. So I was like, well, I have a camera. I guess I will just record it. And yeah, pretty soon after that, it became, there was enough monetary value coming in that I was like, all right, I can cut back on my day jobs, my several day jobs. I had like 3 at the time. And yeah, this slowly started to take the place of each one. And yeah, that became my full-time job. But yeah, truly financial desperation. Sick of the people I was working for. Yeah. And also, I love movies. So talking about them didn't feel like that much work. I mean, it is a lot of work, but it was something I was doing already. So yeah, kind of the gift and the curse of making the thing that you love your job.
Totally. I feel that way. I mean, sometimes I'm like, God, I would love to not have to write about this thing that I like. It would be great,
right.
That kind of thing would be.
I just want to enjoy it. Oh, I can't.
Just want to enjoy it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's why I've started watching movies that nobody else likes, so that I have no reason to write about them.
Oh, what a great gray
would like
area.
to at some point. Yeah, absolutely. Did you find it, I mean, because film YouTube is sort of like this big monolith of a thing. Did you find it relatively easy or quick to kind of find your niche to it? And I mean, because the benefit of YouTube is people will find you eventually, but did you feel like it was, easy to find your foothold, I guess?
I think so. Which was surprising because I think when I first started, I was like, not that I didn't know if I had anything to say, but I guess I didn't know that what I had to say fit like such a specific niche. I had a lot of women film professors, which I guess is very rare experience. So yeah, I had a lot of wonderful film analysis classes that I took from wonderful professors that gave such a well-rounded, queer film theory, feminist film theory, even like really weird stuff like Freudian psychoanalysis in film. Yeah, and it was, I love learning, as many people do. Probably many people on YouTube like to do.
Would hope so.
Would hope so. Yeah, so I think just, working from that framework. And also, I've always loved film. It's always been something that, I had a portable DVD player and would just watch, the most outrageous things that I could rent by myself in my room growing up. But, being a woman, you do, yeah, it's very interesting. You know, internalize a lot of things from film, and
Mm.
how femininity is portrayed, and what's excluded from film, and compounded on that, being queer. So yeah, film was both like a wonderful, beautiful way to feel connected to a world outside of the one I knew. But also just like huge missing gaps of experiences. Yeah. So with all of that, it turns out I guess I have enough to talk about. But I guess it did yeah. It did surprise me a little bit that yeah, I mean, Lindsay Ellis, of course, was such like
Sure.
a pioneer. So not to say that there was no one doing it. But yeah, and then also my background is in acting, which was, I guess a little bit of a different angle just because I, had worked on many film sets and kind of knew things from inside outward, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
one of the, I mean, like I said before, like I love your channel, and I think all of your arguments about film and everything are wonderful. But also one of my favorite things
Mhm.
about them is that you play other characters that like within this weird meta narrative of you like watching videos of yourself talking about movies. I think is one of the I was going to say most unique, which is not a good. That's not good grammatically, but but it's a unique spin on it that I hadn't seen before, and you're very entertaining.
Oh,
So you needed me to tell
thanks.
you, but
I try to keep it fun,
yeah,
why not? Life's
because you do
short.
talk about pretty heavy topics a lot of the time. So
Yeah.
it is kind of nice to be like, well, let's cut back to what what fake 50s Maggie has to say.
No. A relief, I guess. I mostly write it in for myself, I think.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, eh, one of the videos that I think everybody should watch is sort of your, and I'm curious if this is what eventually led to you making a David Lynch podcast, but you kind of did a 1-to-1 of The Shining and Lost Highway, or just sort of the way
Mhm.
Kubrick was with his actresses and the way that Lynch is with his actresses. Was that sort
Mhm.
of the beginning for you, and why was Lynch sort of somebody that you kind of gravitated to?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because, I could say a million times that I love both directors,
Of
and people still like,
course.
you hate. Could just admit it. It's like, no, I truly love both of I mean, both them as people, both them their work. But that, doesn't mean that I can't criticize. And also, like, honestly, at the end of the day, it was like, Kubrick, I think you were selling yourself short. Like, I really do not think, many of his tactics were as important to the final product as he believed it to be. Which is very interesting. But yeah, I mean, just comparing the two, David Lynch has had such a great track record working with his actors. His actors love him, and he loves his actors. He's a very artistic guy through and through. And now that like I am an actor, it's actually so rare for a director to give that much time and attention to actors, especially now in the digital age. There's a million things that they have to keep their eyes on.
Right.
It's not even by choice that we don't often get as much time working on material as we like. But yeah, he always puts performances first, always puts actors first. He's so wonderful on set. Um, yeah, so it was like it kind of became an easy comparison. Both of them have such a like a distinct filmography. Um, but yeah, one of them, had terrible reports from set, and the other, the actors just cannot get enough. So yeah.
It truly, like, it's baffling to me because, like, there's that whole making of The Shining where you can see what a monster Kubrick was to Shelley Duvall. And I know it was
Yeah.
part of his process or whatever, but it's like, it's not like people, because I've heard that too, where it's like, oh, you're just saying that because you don't like Stanley Kubrick or you don't like what it's like.
Right.
There's a whole friggin' video of him yelling at her. There's like, come on, man. Like, people get really in their heads, or I guess like about Kubrick specifically. And yeah, like, how
Hmm.
can you be a film student and not enjoy some aspect of Kubrick? I think it's like
Right.
it's yeah.
Yeah. I
Um
mean, they're both like brilliant in their own ways. That's why, again, that's why it's like, yeah, I think he was selling himself short. I think it really was like an insecurity. Like you couldn't trust Shelley Duvall as a person. Like, you didn't want to treat her as a
Right.
person because you didn't believe she would give you the performance I don't know. Yeah, and also very, like, counterintuitive to, you know, the acting profession. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like there's some of those directors that think of the actors as puppets, or
Mhm.
they're or they're very technical, and it's sort of like to the detriment of, one would assume, to the detriment of creativity, even though like maybe the movies are great or whatever, but like,
Mhm.
you know, um and especially if like it's not, if they're not good at explaining themselves. I think that's another thing, or like explaining what they're doing, because like I've
Yeah.
acted and stuff, and it's like you
Mhm.
just tell me what you're going for, like I'll work with you on that. Like it's so much,
Right.
it's so much better than
Mhm.
just going, you're not doing it right. It's like, well, how am I not doing it right? I had an argument a few years ago on Twitter,
Mhm.
back when it was called Twitter, and two, when I was still on it,
Yeah.
um about that. And it's like,
Mhm.
if you have to do 48 takes of one scene, are you a really good director? Like, you know what I
Right?
mean? Like,
What's
I'm not
going
saying that the
on?
result isn't good, but like, if you do make your actors do 50 takes, same with Kubrick, honestly, you make them
Mhm.
do that many takes and then use take 20, but you made them do 30 more takes. It's like, did you just not know what you were looking for? And that's okay.
Right.
But like,
Right.
I don't understand. If you're going to do that many takes, use the last one. That's what I'm
Right?
like. You better use
Make
that last
it
one. Otherwise it's
worth
not worth
their
it.
while. It's wild. And it's also like, especially with these, more well-established directors, like they do have the luxury of rehearsal times.
Mm,
Things that younger directors, things that even like, bigger blockbusters, they may not afford you.
right.
So in that case, there might be wiggle room that you're not getting it exactly because you didn't have the prep time. But yeah, especially for established directors, you have all the time in the world. It's also very funny because, now we're in the world of self tapes from, an actor's perspective.
Yeah.
And, there's only so many tapes that you can do. I'm sure there are some people that do a million and, pick the one they like best. But really, I mean, most people do like three and then pick one because, at the end of the day, when you show up on set, you are only going to have a couple takes. So
Yeah.
doing that many takes, it's not very conducive to you giving your best performance. Yeah, it's very interesting. Especially directors coming up now. Again, it is so tech focused that I think a lot of them, yeah, do kind of feel out of their depth directing actors, which, yeah, pros cons. It's just the world that we live in. It's no one's fault, but yeah, I
Yeah.
see that a
It
lot.
definitely, because I went to college in the early 2000s,
Mhm.
and it was very, my school did, it was all theory. We didn't have a practical,
Mhm.
like, you know, production side of things. So I took a lot of acting classes too, because it's like, it just feels like that was part of what you had to do, like, in order
Yeah.
to, you never know. And I do feel like nowadays it's like, how do you use a camera properly? How do you light? And which is like, I don't know how to light. That was a big problem. I didn't know how to light or use sound properly, but I feel like
Mhm.
I could talk to people. And I do feel like that is something that's missing nowadays.
Yeah, truly. Yeah, and like even yeah, the university I went to, yeah, it was very segmented. Like I was in a, conservatory style for my acting, which meant that yeah, directors couldn't just like take classes or drop in. Yeah, it was a lot of the students that came together to like fill in those gaps.
Mm.
But yeah, yeah, it's really hard. There's like a lot to learn. But also, I mean, so not to bring it back to Lynch, but he being an artist first and foremost, that kind of like I think rounds out his experience and yeah, brings it to set. You can tell he, like I said, loves working with actors and
Yeah.
yeah.
It's I Yeah, let's just dive in. I love David Lynch so much, as just a guy. I think he's so funny, and like, during the early days of the lockdown, like his daily weather reports on his YouTube channel were just like a source of like comfort every single
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
It kind of made me sad when he stopped doing. Actually, I understood. He did
Mhm.
it when Angelo Badalamenti, for those who didn't know, had passed away, which is a longtime composer and friend.
Mhm.
And he just never did it again. But like, those were such, like, every single day I would watch the minute and a half of him talking about the
Yeah.
weather here in Los Angeles, and it was just like,
Yeah.
It was great. What was the first movie you saw of his, and what was
Mhm.
the how long did it take you kind of to get in on his wavelength? Because I do think that is a thing about his work.
Great question. I am trying to think if I saw anything before I saw Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is the one that comes to mind as my first
Mhm.
foray into Lynch. Yeah, which is interesting. I feel like I must have seen something at film school, maybe The Elephant Man, if I were to think about it. But
Mm,
yeah, Twin Peaks was the first one where, I had my, film education. I was coming in very much with glasses on.
right.
And yeah, I was very intimidated, especially yeah, Twin Peaks was a little bit before my time. I think I was like born the year that it premiered. So yeah, like culturally missed it. Uh and just had like a passing knowledge of his work, just osmosis, through film school. Which also surprising how little he came up during my education
Yeah.
considering. Yeah, that was also pretty shocking. But yeah, so watched Twin Peaks. And I had grown up on soap operas, watching with my grandma, and I was like, oh, I know exactly what this is. I love One Tree Hill. If anyone knows any deep cuts about me, that is one. I love it, ironically and unironically, all at once. And there's so much of that in Twin Peaks. Just at the surface level, characters like acting over the top. But then also immediately there is so much under the surface. And I think the first things that really struck me about David Lynch's work was how much empathy he has for his female characters, which like as I mentioned before, growing up is not always it stands out when you notice it. And that is such a central part of his work. And especially in Twin Peaks, the core idea being we think we know who Laura Palmer is, and all of us are, filling in our ideas of who she is. But she is a, multifaceted person, both prom queen and, dealing drugs on the side. Like all the dichotomies that he puts his characters in, I think is so fascinating. And I immediately also fell in love with, yeah, just the character archetypes that he plays with, and the textures that he gives them. It's so like wonderful. Honestly, like an actor's dream, um, in a lot of ways. So yeah, those are the things that immediately gripped me. But yeah, his like dedication to uh trying to portray I don't even want to say a feminine point of view. I don't really like gendered words was the best way to describe it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Oh.
I think sorry to
Mhm.
interrupt. I think he like because I think you're absolutely right. But it is something that contemporary critics, when stuff was coming out, would be like, "Oh, this is very exploitative."
Mhm.
There's that famous story about Roger Ebert saying that Isabella Rossellini was actually exploited, and that he should, Lynch should feel bad about it and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But it's like, no, what he does, what I think, what I like a lot about David Lynch is that he looks at the way the world is and shows you how scary it actually is. And like,
Yes.
and to me, it's
Mhm.
like you empathy is a great way to say it, because it's like you do feel bad for all of these women that get brutalized in these movies, but also you go, well, he's not just doing it to show you. It's not just titillation.
Right.
It's not just kind of exploitation. It's literally
Mhm.
for um, character stuff, like and
Yeah.
it's yeah,
It's wild, even, comparing it to, I love like 70s films. It's probably like my favorite genre, that film
love it.
frame. Wonderful. My
Mhm.
partner and I always joke though that, we'll put on like a fun romp, and then in the middle of it will be just a sexual assault where it is
Oh my
filmed. Yes,
god.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and you're supposed to like it is clearly you are supposed to enjoy the experience, and it is such a stark contrast to, yeah, I mean, David Lynch, anytime he shows, violence, it is to depict reality, and it is to make you uncomfortable, to scare you, to, build empathy. It's never like, isn't this so cool? Like, dealt with very delicately. And I think, especially as filmmakers, that's so interesting because, sure, like on paper, they might seem like the exact same scenes or, might even have the exact same beats, but how each one is crafted can make the world of a difference with what story you're telling. Um, yeah, there is, yeah, the question of like depiction um, is a very interesting one because, yeah, there are directors that, depict very dark things. And it truly is like how they handle it, what the rest of the story is doing with those characters, when that happens in the story. And I think Lynch, yeah, is just a very as a feelingsy person, but yeah, just like very empathetic and is able to craft stories that, yeah, address, very terrible things that happen in our society, but in a way that, yeah, I think addresses it rather than, you know, makes it fun.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's I watch a lot of Italian movies. Like I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
why, just a ton of,
Mhm.
and a lot of those Italian exploitation movies. They're very stylish and everything, but it is just like,
Mhm.
oh God, how many assault scenes am I gonna have to watch in this thing? And then like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also killing of real animals, which we won't even get into. But like,
Yeah.
why were you
Yeah.
doing stuff like this, man? You didn't have to do
Well,
that.
to do that, I've seen
Yeah,
it faked pretty well in this
yeah,
time period. Yeah.
yeah. Um, it's the reality of it. Yeah, so I came to David Lynch in a very roundabout way. Well, I
Ooh,
was like
uh-huh,
4 maybe when Twin Peaks was on. So
uh-huh,
I remember the promos for it. My parents didn't let me watch Twin Peaks, but I
mhm.
also knew it was like a cultural, huge thing. But like one of my earliest memories is Jack Nance going, "She's dead, wrapped in plastic." That's like one of my first TV memories.
Oh my
Um
god, wow.
and then I didn't watch Twin Peaks
Mhm,
or anything like that. And then in college was a few years after Mulholland Drive came out, and I went to Blockbuster and rented it, and that was the
mhm.
first one that I watched, and it was like, what? Like, talk about a weird one to watch first, and then I did them all kind of out of order. I think I did like Elephant Man after that, which I love. I love them all,
Mhm.
but and then the first time I watched Lost Highway, I turned it off. The first Robert Blake scene, I was like, nope,
No.
no, thank you.
No.
I'm not going to ask you,
Yeah.
sir. Like, and then like, and then so then I was like, well, I got to keep giving these a try. And I think Inland Empire had just come out or something like that.
Mhm.
But then one of the last ones I watched was Blue Velvet, and I'm like, well, this is pretty normal considering.
Comparison. Oh, okay. Yeah.
um, but
That's
yeah,
such a
it was
funny
like
order.
very much. And then I watched the first season of Twin Peaks, and then I never watched the second season. And
Mhm,
then during the pandemic, again during lockdown, I finally watched it all. And
mhm,
like, obviously the return is like just a crazy amazing work of art, but
mhm.
I think that Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is not only one of like maybe his best movies, it is the scariest movie he's ever made, and he makes some scary movies, and like that movie like really got to me in a way that I did not expect it to get to me. Like, just
Yeah.
everything about it is very upsetting.
I know. Well, and also like, because it's based on the TV show, there's, like a little bit of baggage, but it takes
Sure.
such a different like approach and direction. And yeah, I mean, the whole film is about Laura Palmer, which again is like, the question of the series,
Mhm.
if in a roundabout way. Yeah, that's also one of my favorite films. Such a different tone
Very
than
much. It's like he took,
yeah.
and maybe this was just like a function of not having Mark Frost involved, but like it's
Mhm.
like he took the shots from the TV show of Bob in the corner and just turned that feeling into an entire movie, because
Yes!
it's so intense the entire time. And even the weird stuff is like weird and kind of funny, but it's also really menacing like throughout,
Mhm.
which there's like no levity in the film,
No levity. I
really.
will say, the shot of Bob, like, crawling up the bed is one of the to this day, one of the freakiest images
Yeah.
that I recall in film history, up there. There's a few that stick with me, and that is just always in the top. Top.
he's so, yeah. Um, so for the podcast Lynch Pins,
Mhm,
you're going out of order, which is great. I
mhm,
also love that you started with the straight story and then went to the Elephant Man, which are two that do not get talked about nearly enough. Um,
mhm.
um, my this week, in order to get back, it's been a while since I watched them. I on
Yeah.
subsequent nights watched Lost Highway, The Straight Story, and Mulholland Drive. And my
Whoa!
wife watched with me. She had never seen any of them. And
Wow!
she was like,
Mhm.
"How weird is this one?" And I was like, "Well, let's get into it." So, um, but like I remember thinking the straight story was so strange that he made it. And then now I'm like, "Oh, this is the most David Lynch thing he could have done, is made like a G-rated, like you put in the YouTube video version. He made a Disney movie. It's a Disney movie
Mhm.
about an old man getting old. It's
Yeah.
amazing."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. Tracking his career is so interesting. And that's, I think, one of the things that is so like intriguing about Lynch is he both has a very distinct style, but has applied it to such a wide array of films, and film types and almost like goals within the films. Yeah, it's very interesting to see the similarities throughout it because yeah, he's able to tap into so many different styles, and clearly has such just a love of history of film, and you can see that, seep into a lot of his work. Um, yeah, it's just, good
Yeah. It,
filmography.
It's really good. I love
Mhm,
a limited filmography too. Like not to say that like, a John Ford or somebody is like not worth watching, but like
mhm,
somebody who is kind of more just about the craft. Like but it's
mhm.
so kind of vibes. He's just a vibe filmmaker. Like he tried to be a studio filmmaker. He didn't like it. And so then he
Yeah,
stopped. And I think that's it's a rarefied air for somebody of his kind of stature to be in, because most people want to get into the movies to be in movies.
absolutely. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, yeah, now I'm thinking about, his Dune. Just wild.
Which
Yeah,
I really like it.
I know, me
I don't think
too.
it's good, but I really like it.
Same. There are
Yeah.
so many things that I was like just like tickled that they kind of kept in the new Dune. Just like bits and pieces that yeah. You've
Yeah.
seen. You've seen.
Well, you can tell in that movie what parts he really cared about, which was like all the weird like spacey stuff and
Mhm.
like the
Right.
internal monologues and like all the kind of like strange dream sequences. And it's like that's clearly
Mhm.
what he was caring about, but like he didn't, also that movie was a mess just in
Yeah.
general. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
won't
it
try
is
to defend that one too much.
yeah, it's a wild ride. It is he's such a wonderful craftsman at creating feeling through image. So I call him like a feeling Z director. But it's both about who he is as a person, but in his filmography, the way that he's able to create feeling through images, which is why, we do get so many like weird, quote unquote, like Lynchian shots, like, extracted from the film. Yeah, are super weird. Like, why are we seeing this? But taken within context, yeah, it evokes such, the feelings are so on point. It's like, oh, here I'm supposed to feel very disturbed. Here I'm supposed to be lulled into a sense of security. Yeah, and he does that even within his Dune. The dream sequences are still like some of my favorite parts. He packs so much meaning in those. Yeah, just those quick sequences. Uh, yeah, he really is a master at that. Which is very funny because I feel like, especially in talking about films, we don't often like talk about feelings, even though that's like the core part of a film. The plot is there, but it's there to evoke a feeling in you as the audience, ideally. Um, and to various degrees and, to various goals, I guess. But yeah. A lot of film stuff should be like, how did it make you feel, I guess.
Yeah, and I think
Uh,
that was definitely something when I was in college that I kind of couldn't get around, like the plot to some of these movies. I'm just like, I can't follow this. And like once you
mhm.
kind of it took a really long time, but like I was always intrigued enough to go back. And I think that was something that like really made him stand out to me as just an artist, because like there are filmmakers whose work I do not vibe with and then I just
Mhm.
don't return to, but like him, I'm like, there is something here, I'm just not getting it, or I'm not feeling it. And realizing it's feeling and not intellectualizing is, I
Mhm.
think, was a key, because it's not that he's not smart, but like it is so much about mood and emotion and everything like that.
Totally. Yeah, and, like, from, just from the acting perspective, uh, you're supposed to forget plot because you, as the actor in the piece,
Right.
yeah, don't know what's coming. And, you do as the as the person playing it. But yeah, when you're acting, you're in the moment. You're not supposed to know what comes next or, care. We as humans can't predict the future. So ideally that's, how you're working. So yeah, when I was in my early Lynch foray, I was like, "Oh yeah, discard the plot, easy." And then later I was like, "Oh, okay, add it back into the equation." But I mean, again, that's why he gets such great performances from his
Mm.
actors because they really are, written with the actor and actors in mind, and quite often a large cast of actors, an ensemble, which is also just wonderful and yeah, yeah.
And so much personality in the people that he casts too. Like, obviously
Mhm.
everybody in Twin Peaks, but like just rewatching Mulholland Drive last night. Granted, that was meant to be a TV show, and so there were going to be more time for all these people. But like,
Mhm.
um, just so many people would just pop up and just like, oh wow, he's in this for this one scene. Oh wow, great. Like, um, and just kind of, Naomi Watts is so stinking good in that movie, and I had
Ugh,
forgotten. Like, I just sort of maybe took for granted how good she was in that movie.
right.
But then you get
Well,
to see how different she is from the beginning to the end. It's wonderful.
it's wonderful. I mean, also, like, Naomi Watts is a person, like, she has a fantastic work, but a lot of that is brought out when she works with Lynch, like, season 3 of Twin Peaks. That's, again, like, some of my favorite work from her that she's ever done, and not to say she's not, a great actor, well-rounded most of the time, but yeah, when you really have, someone supportive on set like that, and again, someone that has, like, the time and the know-how to pay attention to the actors, yeah, you can get some really amazing work. Yeah, she's brilliant, a lot of the time, but especially Mulholland Drive, yeah.
Yeah. It I mean, it's some of those actors too that had been around a really long time, then to go see what they did with Lynch, like maybe early on, especially like Kyle MacLachlan's another good example. Like,
Mhm.
because I mean, has a hard job to do in Dune, but there is obviously something there that connected with Lynch, and then like you just see his growth, and then when he came back in Twin Peaks season 3, it was just sort of like, oh wow, like
Yeah.
he's still as good as he was, and yet he's better than he used to be. Like it's a really
Mhm.
fantastic portrayal. Um, Twin Peaks season 3. Let's talk about that for 2 seconds. Um,
Alright.
it's like the best thing I've ever seen, and also takes so long, and I know that's on purpose. I'm like,
Mhm.
I've only watched it one time, but I'm like, I
Yeah.
know this is on purpose, and we're meant to think this is boring at times. And
Uh-huh.
I love that he convinced a cable network to let him do that.
I know. One of my favorite behind the scenes clips is that clip of him, like, complaining about the time constraints because just
Yeah,
so relatable. Who among us, under a deadline isn't miffed at whoever gave it to us? Uh, yeah, it's a brilliant piece of work. The whole Dougie Jones saga, I was like, "Yes, yes, this is the experience of." This is to say, like, one of my other favorite TV shows, Breaking Bad,
mm,
one of my favorites of all time. But also, like, this is kind of the experience of watching Breaking Bad. Although Bryan Cranston is a much more active character than Dougie Jones, but yeah, it is just kind of like magical man character. Where less so in Breaking Bad than other series, maybe more so in Sopranos. Although all of these are trying to deconstruct that idea of this like magical main character, but all have various degrees of success. And at the end of the day is still a world surrounded by this like singular often white guy. So yeah, Dougie Jones is just like such a like a funny take on that. And also just like it's like a world within a world. Just the amount of plot armor that they gave him,
Yeah.
just like so funny. Yeah, very pointed in a lot of ways. And again, I mean, honestly, that's probably why Naomi Watts's performance stands out so much because it's like in contrast to the like the shell of Dougie Jones.
I have to
Uh,
think that had to have, and now I had, which I had not thought about until you mentioned Breaking Bad, but like that has to
mhm,
be a direct, the fact that he wears green the whole time, which is a very Breaking Bad thing. The
yeah.
fact that his wife is unnecessarily mean most of the time,
Yeah, and, like,
which,
handles all of the, like, whatever, just like Skylar, like,
yeah,
did a lot of the work on this, scheme they're running.
yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely, and it's out in the desert. Like truly, I had not thought about that until you just said that.
Mhm.
But that's really fascinating. And also, like he just cannot lose. That's one of the best things about the Dougie Jones stuff is that like he can't even go to the bathroom on his own, and yet somehow he is making his company millions of dollars, and he's like mending relationships, and it's just like it's the silliest thing I've ever seen. Um,
Mhm,
and it
mhm.
just, as a meta thing, it's like everybody wants to see Dale Cooper come back, and he's just like, nope,
No,
refuse. I
no.
refuse. You're going to see a lot of Kyle MacLachlan, but you're not going to see very much
Right, you're
Dale
not gonna
Cooper.
see him. Yeah, you're gonna see all the other ways that I want to, yeah, talk about this type of character.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's also just again, on the mood and the tone of his stuff, like that season just feels like decay, like of moral decay, but also like just literal decay. There's just so many shots of just like stuff that's falling apart and gross, and like
Mhm.
it really evoked the mood of like evil corrupting kind of everything, which was, something that was present in the earlier seasons, but like really came to the forefront.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's so much, he had so much more time or space, and I guess, the leeway to
Right.
dedicate, yeah, to like the black and white scenes, the just like sequences of, yeah, just that whole scene that's just like a disgusting gas station. It goes on for like 10 minutes. That's probably an exaggeration, but it feels about
It
that
might.
long. It might be. It might be. Um, yeah, even Sarah Palmer, she removes her face and inside is just the blackness of,
Mm,
I mean all the things that character has gone through and who she represents in, David Lynch's wider filmography. Yeah, it's really I love season 3 of Twin Peaks.
yeah.
Mhm.
And then to give everybody the spoilers for people who haven't seen it, but it's out there. You should watch it. Um, the second to last episode has the Twin Peaks happy ending, and then the episode
Mhm.
after that is just it's so not that at all, and it
Yeah.
again just feels gross. Like he goes into the real world or a different dimension or who knows what, but he
Mhm.
goes into not Sarah or yeah not Laura Palmer's house,
Mhm.
and there's just a dead guy on the ground, and he's just like, oh, we should probably head out. Like it feels so icky, and like in a great, in a great way that more stuff needs to make us feel icky, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to, uh, tangent, but I went to a Star Trek Discovery panel last night, and, those actors had gotten very close throughout the filming of the series, but all of them were talking about how sad it has been that it is ending and how it's been just like a multiple year, like, mourning process, and yeah, with, like, Twin Peaks ending on that episode, it's like, yeah, it's feels bad when something is over, and, even just, like, a TV show that someone loves, when it's over, yeah, like, what do you put in that hole? And
And
filmmakers. Mhm,
leaving your audience with your main character looking confused and then somebody screaming and the lights going out. It's like,
mhm.
I've watched way too many videos now about that, about like what does it mean, and I also ultimately don't think it matters really, like what
No.
is literally happening. It's sort
Yeah.
of just like I don't know if you've seen that. I don't want to disparage anybody, but some people
Mhm.
put way too much emphasis on parts of that are maybe not what he was going for,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
saying that is 100% what's going on, and maybe
Mhm.
that's what you have to do on YouTube. But I say as though I've never been on YouTube before. I know how it works, SEO, etc.
Mhm.
Do you have a favorite besides Twin Peaks? Because I feel like that's most people's favorite thing. Do you have a
Mhm.
favorite film of his?
Ooh. Ah, man, it is hard. I think Lost Highway holds a very
That's
special
a
place in my
fascinating one
heart.
to choose because I don't think that's many
I
people's favorite.
know. I know. I think, yeah, just a lot of things that he was, I think, ruminating on at the time, I feel like came to a head in that movie. Also, I love Patricia Arquette. Yeah, I love her so much in that movie specifically. Yeah, I think it just has a lot to say about uh how people deal with each other and how people deal with each other's the terrible things that we do to each other. Like someone may believe that they are actually just a whole new person. And that last thing I did, that wasn't really me. I mean, we hear that all the time, like that's just a throwaway phrase. Like, that wasn't the real me. This is the real me. And he was like, yeah, well, what if you just became what if? Okay, what would that look like? You just became a whole new person. All right.
Yeah, and they had to let you out of prison,
And
and
they
you.
had to.
It's that, like I said, that was the one that I turned off, and then it took me the longest to
Mhm.
get back to. But like, it actually is like pretty simple in terms of like its construction. You just have to kind of get on board with what's happening. But like
Mhm.
Robert Blake in that movie is still really terrifying, and not just because he was an actual murderer, but
Right?
um,
It certainly adds to it, but without that even, that is just like
yeah,
so many things like don't belong in that movie, and I think that's
yeah,
why I like it because they're there anyways, and it's like, yeah, because I mean, there's like, a lot of ways to look at it or take it, but I mean, this extreme violence also doesn't belong on our society, and yet here it is. Yeah. It's very I also watched it, I think later, or I had watched many of his other movies
mm,
before I watched that one. Um, yeah. A lot of them hold a dear place, but yeah, just something about that really gets me. Also the burning building in the middle of
yeah.
Joshua Tree. Just a very iconic image, but yeah.
And just like visually too, it's so like it's dark. It's literally a dark movie in terms of like
Mhm.
everybody's hair's black except for Patricia Arquette's second character, who is supposed to be this kind
Mhm.
of object of purity and everything like that. And then like
Yeah.
um uh and then just everything kind of looking either dark red or dark kind of brown and everything like that. I also love that
Mhm.
he used his real house for Bill
I
Pullman's house,
know. I know. I was like,
which
yeah, creepy house. I see why you said it here.
yeah.
Woo.
Uh, it's funny watching that, especially after you see his videos of his, just him working in his workshop, and it's like that's where what's her face got murdered. Renee,
Right
the character.
there.
Yeah, it's funny. I do think I really like that movie more than because I had to
Mhm.
revisit it so many times. It's a really good one, and that was, like I said, that was the one we watched first because I wanted to watch them in chronological order. And
Yeah.
it's like a weird crime nightmare, a really nice movie, and then another weird crime nightmare.
Mhm.
Um, but it's funny. It's funny watching them so close together, but because like Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive kind of are doing the same type of thing, like you were saying, of like
Mhm.
making yourself another person to kind of cope with things not going your way or being not who you want it to be and everything like that. It's
Mhm.
but we get it in reverse in the two movies. We get to see the happy version first in Mulholland, and then the sad version, and then it's the other way in Lost Highway.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much. I mean, all of his films, are like well, not even really so, but yeah, those 2 are very thematically linked in my mind and visually. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well,
Do you have a least favorite? I mean, I suppose it's probably Dune, but it might not be. I don't know. I don't know you.
you don't know me. Honestly, I mean, Dune has grown on me just because
I
it's
right?
so
Yeah.
fun. I mean, it's so like and also the first time I watched it, I will say I was like, "What the fuck?
Yeah.
What the fuck? What the
I did
fuck?"
the same.
Yeah. But then and then on the second time, I was like, "Honestly, okay." Like, after I got the first viewing out of my system, it did make much more sense to me. So yeah, I'll give it that. Yeah, as far as a least, yeah, I don't really know if I have a least. I guess, well, Inland Empire is the hardest to
It's the hardest to
watch.
watch. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
But I think it's still saying something very important, so I don't dislike it. But as far as like viewing experience, yeah, it is so just like it feels like watching layers of grime on
Yeah.
top of each other. So yeah, that's probably the most uncomfortable to watch. Uh, but thematically, I wouldn't say it's my least favorite. Least favorite
Yeah.
viewing experience.
Right. It's the one I revisit the least, I think.
Yes.
Or have maybe thought about the least. I don't know if that's probably true too, because like,
Hmm.
I don't know. I do almost forget about it sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, there's that one too. Like in
Yeah.
between Mulholland Drive and Twin Peaks 3. You kind of go like,
Like
oh
the,
yeah,
the digital, what they feel. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
distinct, which I think adds to like the griminess because it does look like someone just like made it on their homemade camera, and also very much about sexism in the film industry. So yeah, there's that like,
yeah.
ew. Yeah.
But then Laura Dern, like she's another just absolute, we haven't mentioned Wild at Heart yet, but she's so good in that.
So good.
Which is I mean, that movie is very weird, but not as weird as I think that one's very violent. I think that's where that one goes off the deep end, is the violence. But
Yes, yeah.
but yeah, she's so good in that, and she's so good in and so different in Blue Velvet, and then as Diane in Twin Peaks. It's just like he's got this roster of people that he uses, and they're always good. And like you said earlier, like they do their best work when they work with him, and I think that really says a lot about him as a director. Like not just that they give great performances, but that they want to continue to work with them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I talk about Twin Peaks season 3 again, but I do think that's one of the magical things about it is all the actors are playing who they are in Twin Peaks, but all of them have monologues or scenes that call back to their previous work with Lynch, where it's kind of like a retrospective. I mean, Laura Dern has that amazingly terrible monologue that is very similar to her character in Wild at Heart. Is almost kind of retreading the same backstory. Yeah, so for all of them, it was like a wonderful like reunion, but also retrospective of everything they've done.
Yeah. And also just, so many people in that season passed away, like in between the time they made it and when it came out. And then just right after it came out too. Like that was a really like, oh my God, they died too. Like there's so many people in it. And so there is this sort of like funereal, like kind of atmosphere that wasn't intended, but like it definitely feels that way too, which again feels very retrospective, where you're like, oh yeah, the log lady. I mean, that's one of the saddest scenes in the whole wide world is when she's just on the phone. But yeah. And again, those are people that he worked with for a million years.
Yeah.
I've not thought ahead about this question I'm about to ask you. Is Eraserhead the most distinctive first film ever in the history of first films?
Oh, wow. That's so funny because earlier when you had asked me my least favorite, I had forgotten about Eraserhead. I might.
It's another one that's not fun to watch.
Right. Oh, just not fun. Honestly, that was the first, when I first watched Eraserhead, that was one that I had to turn off and then come back to later. I mean, honestly, probably.
Right.
I mean, it's so distinct. It's like it's German expressionism. It's how literally gross LA is and was. It's both extremely distinct and obviously inspired by so many classical kind of filmmaking ideas, but just made and with again like a disgusting veneer around it. I mean, what an interesting film. It's I don't know if you read his Room to Dream. But listening to him talk about that time making Eraserhead is just very it almost kind of translates how like turbulent his life was, having a kid for the first time, getting married, but also not feeling connected to domesticity, being excited about this, but also like the amount of time and effort that he had to put into it, the support he was given, and then the support like that he wasn't given when he was going over in shoot time. Yeah, just like a very, I mean, for how turbulent making it was, what a piece to come out of it. Yeah, and I mean, there's so many things in it that he continued to do, both like he has like grand scale things and then very small, intimate parts of the film, and that's one of the things that is so interesting about Lynch. He loves juxtaposition, both in, his actors. He'll pair a very like subdued actor with a very like over the top actor. We see that a lot in Twin Peaks. You'll see like that combination a lot. But then also in like his scale of things. And I think Eraserhead is one of the best examples of that juxtaposition of, yeah, we're in a huge dystopian machinery world, and yet you were also just like in tiny apartments, and we're looking at weird little puppies and this. I love the worm baby. I love him so much. Spoiler alert, but when he stabs him, I'm like, why? This is just a cute little crying worm guy, was it
Ye-
really that annoying?
I mean, he cried at night. What else do you want him
Right
to
at
do?
night. One of my favorite lines, I think, is when she's like, "I don't even know if it's a baby yet." Like they don't know what this thing is.
Yet.
I love it. Yeah, yeah. They
Implying one
don't
day they might.
know. Yeah. Yeah, great. Big swing. Again, big emotions. It is very interesting that so much of his work later would be dedicated to, kind of pulling out, a feminine perspective. Whereas this one, isn't really concerned itself with it, which is, it's very interesting. It's just interesting that he kind of never did that again, where this is, very much from the main character's perspective. The wife is kind of like terrible in several weird, odd ways. Yeah, yeah, just
Yeah, that's
interesting. Yeah.
very much very interesting. And also just like his use of, he's the sound designer on all of his movies because he
Hmm.
knows what sound is in his head. And it's like, and there's that distinctive droning throughout all of Eraserhead that appears in a lot of his other
Hmm.
movies. Like most of them, in fact, at least have some portion of that.
Which again, yeah, a director that can pay attention to his actors, be cognizant of the filmscape that's going to go along with his visual scape. Yeah, really he does it all. Yeah, and it's very very hard to do. What a unique, talented guy.
Pretty much. Yeah. What a good and unique guy, I think.
What a good and unique guy. Uh,
um that is funny that you say that about feminism too, in or lack thereof in Eraserhead,
mhm,
because really, I mean, as much as I love the Elephant Man, other than Anne
mhm,
Bancroft's character, there's not really a substantial woman character in that movie. And then
mhm.
Dune has great women characters, but that whole movie is sort of just more
Uh,
about spectacle and stuff. It really
yeah.
took him doing Twin Peaks, because from then on, or I guess
Mhm.
no, Blue Velvet first.
Yeah.
But that's sort of like truly the beginning of like what we know of as David Lynch, is like from Blue Velvet onward, and he's just sort of been
Mhm.
exploring similar themes throughout.
Mhm.
Um, even though, like as you saw in when you did your episode about the Elephant Man, like it's such a beautiful movie and a really like,
Yeah.
it is a humanist movie, even though it feels really cold and distant. Like it actually is
Mhm.
so much less that, which is kind of him in a nutshell.
Mhm. Yeah, like exposing the well, it's both like exposing the gooey underbelly of our like disgusting society and like vice versa when things look too good to be true, like oftentimes they are. And again, it's like that juxtaposition that he loves to depict. It's usually these two things in tandem. Um yeah, I think he's like a great I don't know, role model for, especially like I don't know, like young men that want to go into filmmaking. It's like you don't have to like you don't have to be a woman to, be curious or care about it, or even, like depict, yeah, just a different point of view. And I love all of Lynch's filmography.
Mhm.
I love all of his characters. I'm so glad we get to, see little worlds of all of them. And I think that just adds to, yeah, like his great varied filmography is how many different perspectives he takes into consideration. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just, that he's got that line that he himself says as Gordon Cole in season 3 of Twin Peaks, "Fix your hearts or die." And I think that's one of
Yeah.
the best lines just ever. And it's such a
Mhm.
nice encapsulation of like he's literally saying to the camera, like, "This is what
Yes.
I think, everybody."
This is what, if you have any question, here's what I think about that.
And just his devotion to coffee and cigarettes. Good for him.
So relatable. Girl, me too.
I love that he
Literally
stopped
coffee.
smoking and then was like, I like smoking too much. I'm going to start smoking again. And now he cannot stop.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I mean, like, you are obviously relatively early in the release of the podcast. Are you
Mhm.
it, what kind of went behind the order of the events of what movie you talk about it when?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so we decided to go, and we kind of framed it as least Lynchiest to most Lynchiest,
Love it.
or yeah, I guess like most mainstream, quote unquote, or has the most like recognizable beats. We started the straight story. Yeah, where it's like not I don't want to I like simple, I guess, is the word to describe it, even
Well,
though it's
grease is the
not.
word. I hate
Oh,
to I hate
oh,
to correct you, but
you heard.
yeah, you're right.
You and me got feeling it. Yeah, because I mean, calling from like my own experience with Lynch, like, yeah, it just seemed very like boys club, which is so funny because again, you were talking about how much of a feminine perspective he brings to it, but from the outside, like I certainly didn't know that about his filmography, and I think that's like pretty standard. The things that people talk about is often, yeah, like the violence and the grime and the like weird imagery. So it can feel like very intimidating. It can feel like I don't know what I'm gonna connect to with his work. But yeah, there's so much there. Even for like non cinephiles, for people that just like enjoy movies. And at this point, his way of making film has become so seminal to other filmmakers. I mean, I saw the TV Glow just came out very recently, and there are so many, Lynchian moments in that movie. And that's just one example. So much of it, 824's, like their like
Their
ish,
whole vibe.
their
Yeah.
whole vibe is like deeply inspired by a lot of the things that film has done. So like at this point it's become such a part, especially in American lexicon of filmmaking. So yeah, we structured it in a way that was, if you had never seen a David Lynch movie, this might be a way to, you know get into it, and also kind of track the overarching themes that he's interested in. Yeah, his visual idiosyncratic stuff that, yeah, that he comes back to. Um yeah. Yeah, so we're going in order of that. I think we're going to end the last two, I think, are going to be Inland Empire, and then I think we're going to end with Eraserhead. So to go back to your question, that might be the most
Oh,
iconic
that's a
first
rough 2
movie.
weeks. It's a rough 2
Oh,
weeks.
I know. Which we just did Dune and Wild at Heart,
Love it.
which is like very, very fun combo. Before we get into, yeah, the Mulholland Drive of it all. Yeah. So yeah, we're working our way. But yeah, I think you can watch them in any order, which anyone like calls to you, you
Yeah,
know.
totally.
Totally. Not, but yeah, we structured it just in case someone, was didn't know where to start. This could be a way. Yeah.
Yeah. There kind of is no right or wrong way to get into David Lynch, which I think is another rarity of his, because like, you know, as even most people who like, you know, like a Quentin Tarantino or somebody like that, you kind of go, okay, you kind of gonna need to see where they came from in order to know where they're going and kind of thing. And like,
Right.
he just seems kind of fully formed. It's just kind of like level of budget
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and level of restraint. I think those are the two things that tell you what era you're looking at.
Totally.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Lynch Pins, of course, is you can find it on anywhere you get podcasts, but you can also watch it on your YouTube channel. Which please plug that for people, and also, what is your streaming service called? As though I don't know.
Oh yes, yeah. You can watch Lynch Pins, and many other various video essay, both on YouTube at my channel Maggie Mae Fish, and also over on Nebula. We put our extended versions of the podcast on Nebula, which just has a little more banter, if you will. But yeah, the condensed version is free for you to view up on YouTube. But yeah, if you want a little extra spice, it's over on Nebula. And I do also have a show on Nebula called Unrated, which explores the a brief history of sex and gender in movies. So that's also a Nebula exclusive. But yeah, either of those spots, you can find me.
And how can people find you on social media if you choose to be found? I
Oh,
always have to
yes.
preface that.
I know. Oh man, I have been so happy not being on Twitter, but
It's
technically
great. It's truly great. I truly love it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's the best.
Recommend.
Mhm.
You can still follow me there if you want. I still do updates on there. My partner will do it for me quite graciously. Every once in a while.
Now
Something
that is a good partner. That is the sign of a good partner
I
who will go on Twitter
I know.
willingly for you.
I know, they're the best. But yeah, I am on Twitter, Blue Sky, Maggie Mae Fish, but also Instagram. That's fun. That's one that
That's the
I
fun
mean,
one.
that's the fun one. It sucks in its own way, but I have really cute pictures of my cats. So if that sparks your interest, that's where they are. Yeah.
As a cat owner of, or an owner of 3 cats, owner of a
Mhm.
broken cat. No, that's not it. I also, that's Instagram is the best for that. So yes, cats.
Yeah.
You can follow me on Instagram too at functional_nerd, and please follow me on Letterboxd,
You letterbox.
Kyle_Anderson.
I want to follow you. I don't letterbox, but I love reading other letterboxes. So I'm gonna follow you.
It's a really nice way to just kind of keep track of what you're watching.
Yeah.
And I also like, because it's kind of, you kind of gamify it. You can go like, how many movies have I ever seen? Oh my God, I need that number to go up.
uh-huh. Ooh, okay. I want to follow you. I'll read your reviews.
Yes. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you so much, Maggie Mae Fish, for being on the show.
Oh,
It was
thank
a
you.
delight
Thank
to
you for
talk to
having
you.
me.
Please join me again next week, everyone, here on Laser Focus, when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit nerdist.com.